Admiral Kim Soo-jin stood before the massive holographic display in Earth's orbital command center, watching 12 alien faces stare back at her with cold disdain. The station hummed quietly around them, its corridors filled with the tension that had been building for months. Outside the reinforced windows, Earth's defense fleet hung in formation like sleeping giants, their weapons powered down but ready. The Galactic Council had finally shown their true colors after 3 years of diplomatic talks that went nowhere. Soo-jin had seen this moment coming since the day humanity first received that arrogant message, demanding they present themselves for judgment. "Your species will cease expansion beyond your current 17 systems," declared Velnash, the Council's primary speaker. His tentacles writhed with barely contained disgust as he spoke, each movement dripping with the kind of superiority that made Soo-jin's blood boil. "Submit to our oversight, or face extinction." The other council members remained silent, but their expressions said everything. The insectoid Kretal clicked its mandibles in what passed for agreement. The energy being Zorthak pulsed with shifting colors that somehow managed to convey contempt. Even the plant-like Verdani representative swayed in patterns that felt threatening. Captain Park Min-ho, Earth's chief diplomat, stepped forward with his hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. He had spent years learning their languages, their customs, their ways of thinking. All of it seemed pointless now. "We seek only peaceful coexistence. Our colonies harm no one. We farm, we build, we explore. We've never attacked any council world or threatened any of your people." "Peace." Velnash's voice crackled through the quantum communicator, dripping with mockery. "Your kind knows only war and violence. We have studied your history, human. Endless conflicts, genocide, destruction of your own world's environment, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, systematic extermination of your own species. The galaxy will not suffer another plague species to spread beyond its home system." The crystalline being's form shifted as it spoke, each word accompanied by sharp, cutting gestures that made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. This was a sentencing. Soo-jin felt her jaw tighten as she watched the alien delegates. Behind her, the command center buzzed with quiet activity. Lieutenant Lee Da-young monitored the quantum communications array, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she recorded every word, every gesture, every micro-expression the translation software could detect. This would all be evidence someday. Captain Yang Soo-min, head of intelligence, leaned closer to his console. His team had been analyzing council fleet movements for weeks, watching as their massive warships positioned themselves at key jump points throughout human space. They weren't here to talk. They were here to deliver an ultimatum before the slaughter began. "We have given you the gift of first contact," continued the Kretal delegate, its voice a harsh buzzing that the translators struggled to render into human speech. "We welcomed you to galactic civilization, despite your primitive nature. And how do you repay this generosity? By spreading like a virus across 17 star systems, consuming resources, breeding without restraint. Your expansion ends now," added Zorthak, its energy form pulsing red with what the computers identified as aggressive patterns. "Return to your home system, dismantle your colonies, submit to council oversight. We will decide if your species deserves to continue existing." Min-ho tried one more time, his voice steady despite the impossible situation. "The colonies you're talking about house over 50 million people. Families, children, scientists, farmers. They've built entire lives on those worlds. You're asking us to abandon them." "We are not asking," Velnash replied coldly. "We are commanding. You have 72 hours to begin evacuation. Any human presence beyond your solar system after that time will be considered an act of war against the Galactic Council." The holographic display flickered as the connection terminated. 12 alien faces vanished, leaving only empty space and the soft hum of the command center's systems. The silence stretched for long seconds before anyone dared to speak. "Admiral?" whispered Commander Choi Jin-woo, his voice barely audible. "The fleet commanders are requesting orders. What do we tell them?" Soo-jin stood perfectly still for a moment, staring at the spot where the council delegates had been. Around her, dozens of officers and technicians waited for her response. These were the best and brightest humanity had to offer, people who had dedicated their lives to exploring the stars and building a better future for their species. She turned slowly to face her staff, her expression grim but determined. Her dark eyes held the kind of cold fire that had carried humanity through every disaster their homeworld had thrown at them. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, plagues, wars. They had survived it all by adapting, by fighting, by never giving up when their backs were against the wall. "Send word to all colonies," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the command center. "Initiate Protocol 7. Contact every ship captain, every station commander, every settlement leader. Tell them the Council has shown us exactly who they are." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Protocol 7 wasn't a retreat order or an evacuation plan. It was something much more dangerous. Every person in that room had been briefed on it during their training, but none of them had ever expected to hear those words spoken aloud. Lieutenant Colonel Nam Ji-hoon, head of Special Operations, looked up from his tactical display. "Admiral, are you certain? Once we activate Protocol 7, there's no going back. The Council will see it as a declaration of war." Sujin's smile was cold as winter on Mars. "Commander, they declared war the moment they decided 50 million. Humans were acceptable losses for their convenience. They want to see monsters. They're about to learn what humans become when someone threatens our families." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers began implementing orders they had hoped never to use. Protocol 7 had been developed in secret over the past 3 years, a contingency plan born from humanity's darkest suspicions about their place in galactic society. Outside the station, the first human warships began powering up their engines, their sleek forms sliding through space like hunting sharks. The galaxy's greatest predators were about to discover why humanity had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain and why they had never stopped being the apex predators they were born to be. The first plasma bombardment struck New Geneva's capital city just as the morning sun painted the sky orange. Captain Han Ji-won stood on the bridge of the evacuation cruiser, Morning Star, watching helplessly as the peaceful agricultural world below erupted in brilliant flashes of destruction. The Council's massive dreadnoughts hung in space like metallic vultures, their weapon arrays glowing with deadly energy. 2.3 million people, whispered Lieutenant Nam Subin, her voice breaking as she monitored the casualty reports streaming in from the planet's surface. Her hands trembled over the communications console as emergency signals flooded their channels. "They're targeting the hospitals first." Through the viewport, Ji-won could see the Council fleet in all its terrifying glory. 12 massive warships, each one the size of a small city, their hulls covered in advanced armor that seemed to absorb light itself. The lead vessel, Velnash's flagship Eternal Judgment, dwarfed everything around it. Its main cannon was already charging for another shot, crackling with purple energy that made the space around it shimmer. "Captain, we're receiving evacuation requests from 17 different settlements," reported Ensign Ko Min-jun from his station. "The orbital defense platforms are trying to fight back, but their weapons can't even scratch the Council ships' shields." Ji-won gritted his teeth as he watched New Geneva's pathetic defense grid attempt to protect their world. The human-built laser arrays and missile batteries fired everything they had, brilliant streaks of light racing toward the alien vessels. The weapons struck the Council ship's energy shields and simply vanished, absorbed like raindrops on glass. The Council's flagship, Velnash, observed the destruction with cold satisfaction. The tentacled being stood in his command chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the systematic destruction of human settlements. His officers, a mix of insectoid Kretal and crystalline Zorthak beings, monitored the bombardment with mechanical precision. "Excellent work, Commander Kretal," Velnash said to his tactical officer. "Ensure every major population center is eliminated. Let this image spread across the galaxy. Show them what defiance costs." The Kretal warrior clicked its mandibles in acknowledgement before returning to its targeting display. Its compound eyes reflected the burning cities below as it selected the next targets: schools, medical centers, residential districts. Nothing was spared. Below on New Geneva's surface, the peaceful farming communities that had fed half the sector were burning. Wheat fields that had taken years to cultivate turned to ash in seconds. The massive grain silos that stored food for transport to other human colonies exploded in chains of fire that could be seen from orbit. Captain Lee Sang-ho, commanding the orbital station New Geneva Prime, tried desperately to coordinate the MICE evacuation efforts. All civilian transports maintain safe distance from the planet. Council forces are targeting anything that moves. But it was too late for so many. The Council forces methodically destroyed every population center with surgical precision, their advanced targeting systems ensuring maximum casualties. Children's screams echoed through emergency channels as evacuation transports struggled to escape the orbital blockade. In the farming town of Riverside, 8-year-old Park Jin-ae clutched her mother's hand as they ran toward the evacuation shuttle. The sky above them burned with falling debris from destroyed orbital stations. Behind them, their home disappeared in a flash of plasma fire. "Mama, where are we going?" the little girl asked, her voice barely audible over the sound of explosions. "Somewhere safe, baby," her mother replied, though she knew nowhere would be safe from the Council's reach. The evacuation transports, Haven's Light, New Dawn, and Safe Harbor, loaded as many refugees as they could carry. Captain Yu Tae-hyun pushed his aging transport ship beyond its safety limits, cramming nearly 3,000 people into spaces designed for half that number. "Captain, the Council ships are moving to intercept," shouted his co-pilot, Lieutenant Yu Hee-jin. "They're trying to cut off our escape route." But here the Council made their first crucial error. In their arrogance, they allowed several dozen transport ships to escape, believing the survivors would spread terror and encourage submission across human space. They wanted witnesses to their power, living proof of what happened to those who defied galactic order. What they didn't realize was that those escaping ships carried something far more dangerous than terrified refugees. The human vessels advanced. Sensor arrays had been recording everything. Every weapon discharge, every ship configuration, every tactical pattern the Council forces used. The data flowed into quantum storage cores, creating detailed blueprints of Council technology and battle strategies. Captain Yu Tae-hyun, commanding the transport vessel Haven's Light, transmitted a final message as his ship cleared the system's edge. Behind him, New Geneva burned like a dying star, its cities reduced to radioactive craters. In his cargo holds, 2,000 survivors wept for their lost world. "This is Captain Yu Tae-hyun to all human forces," he broadcast on the emergency frequency. "New Geneva has fallen, 2.3 million civilians dead, but we have their tactical data, their weapon signatures, everything. New Geneva's children will be remembered, every last one." The message reached Admiral Kim Soo-jin 18 hours later in Earth's orbital command center. She stood in stunned silence as she watched the footage transmitted by the evacuation ships. Hospitals vaporized while patients were still in their beds. Schools destroyed while children played in their yards. Entire families erased in moments of superheated plasma. Around her, the command staff watched in horrified silence. Colonel Im Dong-hyuk, Earth's chief military strategist, clenched his fists as he saw the images of burning cities. They didn't even give them a chance to surrender. They just killed them all. "Look at this," Lieutenant Commander Park So-young called from her analysis station. The Council ships followed specific targeting protocols. They wanted maximum civilian casualties, maximum terror. This wasn't military action. This was genocide. As Soo-jin watched the footage of burning hospitals and vaporized schools, something cold and ancient awakened in humanity's collective consciousness. This wasn't just an attack on one colony. This was a message to every human in the galaxy. Submit or die. But the Council had made a terrible miscalculation. They had studied human history and seen only violence and chaos. What they failed to understand was that humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to unite when faced with extinction. Every disaster that had nearly destroyed them had only made them stronger, more determined, more dangerous. The tactical data from New Geneva was already being analyzed by Earth's best military minds. The Council's advanced technology, their weapon systems, their ship designs, all of it was being broken down and studied. Within hours, human engineers would begin developing countermeasures, new weapons, new strategies. Send this footage to every human colony, every ship, every station, Su Jin ordered quietly. Make sure everyone sees what the Council did to our people, then activate all sleeper cells. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten human children. The Council had just made the gravest mistake in galactic history. They had given humanity something more powerful than any weapon, more dangerous than any fleet. They had given humans a cause worth dying for, and more importantly, a cause worth killing for. The quantum transmission array on Earth's orbital station powered up to maximum output, sending Admiral Kim Soo-jin's message racing across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. Every inhabited world, every space station, every ship traveling between the stars would receive her words within hours. Citizens of the galaxy, Admiral Kim Soo-jin began, standing alone in the broadcast chamber while holographic cameras captured every angle of her calm, determined face. We are not the monsters you believe us to be, but we can become the monsters you need us to be. Her voice carried no anger, no rage, no desperate pleading. That made it infinitely more terrifying than any screamed threat could have been. This was the voice of someone who had already made their decision and was simply informing the universe of what was about to happen. Major Yoon Hye-jin coordinated the transmission from Earth's Strategic Command Center, her fingers dancing across quantum relay controls to ensure the message reached even the most remote outposts in Council space. Beside her, Colonel Im Dong-hyuk monitored massive holographic displays showing Council fleet movements across dozens of star systems. Their main battle groups are forming up at strategic jump points, Dong-hyuk reported quietly. Looks like they're planning a systematic advance through our outer colonies. Classic extermination pattern. The Council's armadas were truly impressive to behold. Hundreds of massive warships, each one bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Their sleek predatory design spoke of a civilization that had conquered the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. Velnash's flagship alone carried enough firepower to sterilize an entire solar system. For centuries, we studied each of your species, Soo-jin continued in her broadcast, her calm tone somehow more menacing than any shouted threat. Your biology, psychology, culture. We learned your languages, your customs, your fears, not for conquest but for understanding. We hoped that knowledge would build bridges between our peoples. She paused, letting the implications sink in across 1,000 worlds where alien beings watched her transmission with growing unease. Instead, it will build your graves. The first signs appeared within days, though the Council leadership initially dismissed them as sensor glitches or false alarms. Their patrol ships began detecting human vessels in impossible locations, systems thought too well defended, sectors supposedly beyond human reach, ancient strongholds that had stood unconquered for millennia. On the bridge of the Council patrol, cruiser Divine Wrath, Commander Zilkar stared at his tactical display in confusion. This cannot be correct. Show me those sensor readings again. His Krital navigation officer clicked nervously. Sir, long-range scanners detected a human frigate in the Zerion system, but that's impossible. The Zerion system has 17 defensive platforms and a full battle squadron. Perhaps the humans are finally launching their pathetic counterattack, Zilkar mused. Alert the fleet. We shall make quick work of their primitive vessels. But these weren't invasion fleets seeking glorious battle. These were small, precise infiltration units that appeared and vanished like ghosts in the void. Ships that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, using technology that the Council's best scientists couldn't explain. Commander Kang Si-ri led one such unit aboard the stealth frigate Silent Thunder. Her ship was a marvel of reverse-engineered Council technology combined with human innovation. Where the aliens built for brute force and overwhelming power, humans had learned to build for stealth, precision, and adaptability. Approaching the Velnash homeworld perimeter, reported her pilot, Lieutenant Beijin Young. Their defense grid is exactly as intelligence predicted. 47 orbital platforms, each one carrying enough firepower to vaporize a moon. Siri studied the tactical display, showing the supposedly impregnable defense network. The Velnash had spent thousands of years perfecting these defenses, layering shield generators and weapon platforms in patterns that made direct assault impossible. No enemy fleet had ever penetrated this system, but Siri wasn't commanding a fleet. She was commanding a single, nearly invisible ship, crewed by specialists who had spent months studying every bolt and circuit in captured Council technology. They knew exactly where to look for weaknesses. "Take us through the northern approach vector," she ordered. "Use their own patrol routes against them." The scanner logs from New Geneva showed they used predictable sweep patterns. The Silent Thunder ghosted through the outer defense perimeter, like a shadow passing through moonlight. Its hull, coated with metamaterials that bent electromagnetic radiation around it, rendered the ship effectively invisible to Council sensors. Every system was designed to run silent, from the dampened reactor core to the specialized thrusters that left no heat signature. "Target acquired," Siri whispered to her demolitions expert, Sergeant Oh Kyung-soo, as they approached a massive power relay station floating in the void. "The main power conduit is exactly where intelligence predicted it would be." Kyung-soo smiled grimly as he prepared his specialized charges. These weren't crude explosives, but precision devices designed to overload the station's own power systems, making the destruction look like an internal malfunction rather than sabotage. "Give me 30 seconds, he said, pulling on his EVA suit. "The Council's about to learn why you never corner a human." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in dozens of star systems. Human infiltration teams materialized in heavily defended sectors that should have been impossible to reach. They didn't come in massive fleets with blazing weapons. They came as whispers in the dark, as shadows that struck without warning and vanished before alarms could even sound. The Council's military leadership was baffled by reports flooding in from across their territory. Defense platforms going offline due to system failures, communication relays mysteriously losing power, supply convoys disappearing between jump points, their crews found days later on remote asteroids with no memory of how they got there. "This is impossible," Velnash raged, in his command chamber aboard the Eternal Judgment. "Humans are primitive. They barely discovered faster-than-light travel a century ago. How are they penetrating our most secure systems?" His tactical officer, a crystalline Zorthak named Mordun, pulsed nervous colors. "Sir, perhaps we underestimated their capabilities. The sensor logs from their evacuation ships at New Geneva, they were recording everything. They may have learned more than we realized. What the Council failed to understand was that humans had been preparing for this moment since first contact. While alien diplomats dismissed them as backward primitives, human intelligence agencies had been working around the clock to analyze every piece of Council technology they could get their hands on. Every trade delegation, every cultural exchange, every diplomatic meeting had been an intelligence gathering operation. Humans smiled and played the role of eager junior partners, while their hidden sensors recorded quantum frequencies, analyzed material compositions, and mapped energy patterns. As Council forces searched desperately for human homeworlds to destroy, they failed to notice the shadows gathering around their own most precious assets, their fortress worlds, their industrial centers, their command and control networks. All of it was being watched, studied, prepared for systematic dismantlement. Admiral Su Jin received the first reports 18 hours after her broadcast. Satsupatin. Successful infiltration missions, 0 casualties, and the Council's leadership in complete panic as their supposedly invincible defenses proved to be made of paper. "They're trying to figure out how we're doing it," reported Major Yoon Hee-jin from her intelligence station. "Their fleet commanders are demanding explanations their scientists can't provide." Su-jin smiled coldly as she watched the tactical displays. The hunt was about to begin in earnest, and humanity's prey had no idea they were already surrounded. The Council had made the mistake of thinking humans would fight like other species, with honor and glory and predictable tactics. They were about to learn that humans were persistence hunters who had spent millions of years perfecting the art of taking down prey much larger and stronger than themselves. The galaxy's apex predators were about to meet Earth's. The first council leader disappeared from his fortress on Xerion Prime during the most secure state dinner in galactic history. High Admiral Krextor of the Cretal Dominion simply vanished. Between the third and fourth courses, his empty chair still warm when his bodyguards noticed he was gone. Every security system remained active, every guard at their post, every door sealed. It was impossible. 3 days later, mining drones found him on a remote asteroid in the Outer Rim, sitting peacefully in a meditation pose with no memory of how he got there. Carved into the rock beside him were simple words in perfect Cretal script, "For New Geneva's children." Captain Lee Jae-sung coordinated the psychological warfare campaign from aboard the stealth carrier Nightfall, a ship that officially didn't exist in any human fleet registry. His vessel drifted through the void between star systems, invisible to every known form of detection. The hull was coated with metamaterials that absorbed sensor waves, while the interior ran on power systems so quiet they barely registered above background radiation. "Target package delivered successfully," reported his operations officer, Major Shin Dong-wook, as they monitored the panic spreading through council communication channels. High Admiral Krextor is back on Xerion Prime, very confused and very scared. Jae-sung studied the holographic display showing dozens of ongoing operations across council space. His teams had spent months preparing for this moment, learning everything about their targets. Not just their military capabilities or political positions, but their personal habits, their fears, their psychological pressure points. "The Velnash Supreme Commander has been relocated," reported Lieutenant Kim Yu-na from her surveillance post aboard the stealth reconnaissance ship Shadow Walker. She had been watching the target for weeks, mapping every detail of his heavily fortified compound. Found in his own meditation chamber with all security systems intact, no signs of forced entry, the Supreme Commander, a massive tentacled being named Velthok, had awakened in his private sanctuary to find a small holographic projector displaying images from New Geneva. Children's playgrounds reduced to ash. Hospitals vaporized with patients still inside. The same footage played on loop for hours before security forces found him, catatonic with horror. Across council space, the impossible continued with terrifying regularity. On the industrial world of Mykonos, the primary power grid failed not through crude bombing, but through elegant sabotage that left engineers baffled. Every component appeared functional, every system showed green, yet somehow the entire planetary grid had been rewired to shut itself down in a cascade failure that would take months to repair. Communication networks went dark as critical relay. Stations vanished entirely, their massive structures somehow transported light years away, while their crews were left unharmed, but terrified on whatever world they happened to be orbiting. The crew of Relay Station Gamma 7 woke up to find themselves on a pristine garden world with no memory of the transition, their station nowhere to be found. "It's like they can move through space itself," whispered Chief Engineer Morcalis to his remaining staff, as they tried to understand how a structure the size of a small moon could simply disappear. "How do you steal an entire space station, Admiral?" Kim Soo-jin monitored the campaign from Earth's orbital command center, receiving reports from dozens of strike teams operating across the galaxy. The tactical displays showed a web of operations that would have seemed like science fiction just months before. Her officers moved like ghosts through council space, appearing where they were impossible, accomplishing tasks that defied every known law of physics and warfare. "Commander Park So-young reporting successful interdiction of supply convoy Delta 9, came the transmission from deep space. Cargo vessels secured without resistance, no injuries to enemy personnel. The convoy's crews had simply gone to sleep during their regular rest cycle and awakened to find their ships adrift in empty space, their engines mysteriously offline. But that wasn't the strangest part. Their cargo holds, previously filled with military supplies destined for Council forward bases, now contained something else entirely. Thousands of memorial flowers from New Geneva, each one preserved in stasis. Fields with holographic tags showing the names and faces of the children who had died in the bombardment. "They're calling it the Silent Terror," reported Major Han Jinna, monitoring Council emergency broadcasts from her intelligence station. The alien news networks buzzed with reports that grew more impossible each day. Their people are fleeing. Core worlds. Military recruitment has stopped entirely. No one wants to be the next to vanish. The psychological impact was devastating. Council citizens who had lived for millennia, believing in their species' technological superiority, were confronting the reality that their most secure installations could be penetrated at will by an enemy they couldn't even detect. Worse, the humans weren't killing anyone. They were demonstrating that they could kill anyone, anytime, anywhere, but chose not to. On the council homeworld of Zeth Kalar, civilian evacuation ships formed massive lines at spaceports. Families that had never known fear in their 1,000-year lifespans packed their belongings and fled to remote colonies, hoping distance would save them from the invisible hunters stalking council space. "I don't understand," wept civilian administrator Yilthara as she boarded a refugee transport with her young ones. "The humans haven't hurt anyone. Why am I so terrified?" Her mate, engineer Corthan, clutched their offspring closer. "Because they could hurt anyone. That admiral said they studied us for centuries. They know everything about us and we know nothing about them." The council's military leadership found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to fight. Traditional tactics were useless against an opponent who struck without warning and vanished without trace. Their massive fleets patrolled empty space, while human operatives moved freely through their most secure facilities. General Thaxmore of the Crystalline Hegemony paced his command center in frustration. "Deploy more sensor drones, increase patrol. Frequencies. They have to be using some form of technology we can detect." But his chief scientist, a brilliant Zorthak named Pulsar, could only pulse helpless colors. "Sir, we've analyzed every piece of debris, every energy signature, every quantum fluctuation. It's as if the humans have learned to exist outside the normal laws of physics." The Council was learning a terrible truth about their enemy. Humans didn't fight wars like other species. They didn't seek glorious battles or territorial conquest with massive fleets clashing in the void. They were persistence hunters who treated an entire galactic civilization like prey to be tracked, studied, and systematically taken apart piece by piece. Lieutenant Colonel Nam Ho Jin, commanding the infiltration unit aboard the stealth ship. Ghost Protocol perfectly embodied this approach. His team had spent 3 months studying the Council's primary military academy on Fortress Prime, learning every detail of its defenses and routines. "The instructors will find their lesson. Plans have been updated," he reported to Admiral Sujin after his latest mission. "Every combat simulation now includes scenarios from New Geneva. Let's see how eager their cadets are to become officers when they understand what humans do to child killers." Velnash himself barely slept anymore, surrounded by guards who themselves feared the shadows more than enemy fleets. His fortress on the flagship Eternal Judgment had been turned into a paranoid maze of overlapping security systems, yet he knew it was useless. The humans had demonstrated they could reach anyone, anywhere, anytime they chose. "Status report," he demanded, as his aide, a nervous Kretal named Zixtal, approached with the daily intelligence briefing. "Sir, we've lost contact with 17 more installations. The humans appeared to have relocated the entire staff of Research Station Omega to a pleasure resort in the neutral zone. They were found poolside, still in their laboratory uniforms, with no memory of the journey." The humans weren't just winning the war, they were demonstrating that the Council's vaunted superiority was an illusion that could be shattered by patient, relentless predators who had learned every secret the galaxy thought it possessed. Every defense could be bypassed, every stronghold penetrated, every leader reached. The message was clear: surrender, or watch your civilization dissolve one impossible vanishing act at a time. Velnash's transmission reached Earth on a heavily encrypted quantum channel, his once commanding voice now reduced to a broken whisper. The proud council leader, who had once threatened humanity with extinction, now sounded like a frightened child calling for help in the dark. We surrender. Please, no more. What are your terms?" The message arrived at Earth's orbital command center during the morning shift change. Admiral Kim Soo-jin stood before the main holographic display, surrounded by officers who had just orchestrated the galaxy's most thorough defeat without firing a single shot in anger. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Captain Jung Min Woo, Approached with the latest field reports, his expression a mix of satisfaction and weary relief. "Admiral, the last strike teams are reporting mission complete. Commander Kang Siri's unit just finished relocating the entire Council Supreme Court to that luxury resort on Risa Prime. They woke up in spa robes, completely unharmed, but thoroughly confused." Around the command center, displays showed the scope of humanity's invisible war. Hundreds of successful operations across dozens of star systems, each one more impossible than the last. Council military leaders found in their own bathtubs, light years from where they'd gone to sleep. Government officials relocated to peaceful garden worlds with no memory of the journey. Entire military installations simply vanishing overnight, their personnel appearing elsewhere with thank you notes and care packages. "Our terms are simple," Sujin replied to Velnash's surrender message, her voice carrying the weight of 2 billion murdered colonists from New Geneva. "The Galactic Council is dissolved immediately. Each species governs itself according to its own values and traditions. Full war crimes tribunals for those responsible for New Geneva, and a new galactic charter, one that protects all sapient beings regardless of their technology, culture or appearance." The transmission went out on all frequencies, ensuring every inhabited world in Council space received humanity's demands. There would be no negotiation, no diplomatic haggling, no compromise. These weren't requests, but statements of fact about how the galaxy would operate moving forward. Commander Lee Hyun-suk had already begun coordinating with moderate elements across former Council territory. Her diplomatic teams, operating from the stealth vessel New Dawn, had been in secret contact with species who had chafed under Council rule for centuries. The insectoid Mantari had been waiting generations for a chance at independence. The plant-like Vidani had never wanted to join the Council in the first place, but were forced into membership through economic pressure. The energy beings known as the Luminari had spent millennia as little more than living power sources for Council technology. "The response has been overwhelmingly positive," Hyun-suk reported from the bridge of her ship as it materialized in orbit around the former Council capital world. 17 species have already declared independence and are establishing their own governments. The Mantari are practically throwing celebration festivals. On the surface of Zethkalar, the Council's former seat of power, massive celebrations erupted as news of liberation spread. Species that had been subjugated for millennia danced in the streets, their various forms of joy creating a beautiful chaos of sound and color that no human artist could have imagined. Captain Shin A-young oversaw the transition process from the newly established human embassy, watching through her office windows as beings from a dozen worlds worked together to dismantle the symbols of Council oppression. The massive statues of Council founders were being carefully removed and replaced, with gardens representing every member species, each one designed by their own people, according to their own aesthetic traditions. "It's beautiful," whispered her aide, Lieutenant Ko Yunji, as they watched a group of young Krital and Zorthak children playing together in what had once been Velnash's private courtyard. "I never thought I'd see the day when different species could just coexist like this." The humans asked for nothing in return except one simple assurance that no species would ever again face extinction for the crime of being different. No tribute, no territory, no special privileges. They simply wanted to ensure that what happened to New Geneva could never happen to anyone else. The transition wasn't without challenges. Some hardline Council loyalists attempted to maintain their old power structures, but they found themselves facing the same treatment their leaders had received. They would go to sleep in their fortified compounds and wake up on peaceful farming worlds with detailed documentation of their crimes and a simple choice: face justice or spend their remaining years in quiet exile, helping to grow food for refugees. Years passed, and the galaxy settled into a new rhythm of peace and cooperation. Trade routes reopened as independent species negotiated their own agreements. Scientific research flourished as former Council restrictions were lifted. Art and culture bloomed as different civilizations shared their unique perspectives with willing neighbors. On the memorial world built where New Geneva once stood, something miraculous took shape. The entire planet became a living monument to the 2 billion souls lost in the Council's bombardment, but also a symbol of hope for the future. Human children played alongside young beings from dozens of species in gardens that bloomed with flowers from 100 worlds. The memorial's central plaza featured a simple granite wall with every name of every person killed in the attack, but surrounding it were playgrounds, schools and parks where the children of former enemies learned together. Krytal younglings taught human kids how to navigate in zero gravity, while human children showed their alien friends how to build sand castles and fly kites. Lieutenant Park Darsom, now Ambassador Park, serving as Earth's representative to the Memorial World Council, often visited with her own daughter, little Park Minseo. They would walk through the Gardens of Remembrance, where holographic projectors displayed images of New Geneva's children playing in fields that no longer existed. "Remember, sweetheart," Darsom would tell her daughter as they watched the mixed groups of children playing together. "We didn't win this war through hatred or revenge. We won because we never forgot how to love something greater than ourselves." Minseo, only 6 years old but wise beyond her years, nodded solemnly as she placed fresh flowers at the memorial wall. "The bad aliens hurt our people, but we helped them become good aliens instead of hurting them back. That's right, baby. And that's why the galaxy is safe now. Not because we were stronger or more advanced, but because we chose to build instead of destroy." The galaxy had learned a profound truth about humanity. Their real strength wasn't their capacity for violence, though they had demonstrated that capacity with terrifying efficiency. Their true power lay in their ability to channel that violence in service of justice, then set it aside in favor of building something better. The Council had feared human brutality, studying their wars and genocides with disgust and terror. They never realized that human compassion was the far more dangerous force. It was compassion that had driven humans to study alien cultures not for conquest, but for understanding. It was compassion that had stayed their hand when they could have destroyed Council civilization entirely. And it was compassion that now built bridges between species that had never known peace. As the twin suns of the memorial world set over the Gardens of Remembrance, children from across the galaxy laughed and played together, their parents watching with the kind of hope that only comes after surviving the darkest of times. The Council's greatest fear had come to pass. Humanity had indeed changed the galaxy forever. They just never imagined that change would be for the better. Disti,